Good evening. Thank you all for attending this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It is meeting this evening in person in the Council Chamber with appropriate social distancing requirements. By use of hybrid meeting system to enable it to be streamed on YouTube, to enable officers to contribute remotely. If voting this evening will be the way of a show of hands, I will report if the vote has been carried and this minutes. The agenda and reports are available on the Council's website. To proceed and confirm that we have a quorum, I'll introduce myself and call each member in attendance one by one to introduce themselves and to confirm that they can speak and hear the proceedings. So I'm Councillor Adam Hicken. I'm the chair of today's meeting. Okay, Councillor.
Sorry, apologies for coming.
Councillor Bashir. Thank you very much. Councillor Sain is Councillor Kaur.
See him here, Chair. I can see him here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murphy.
Murphy, I can see him.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Nawaz.
Yeah, I can see him here, Chair. Thank you.
There. Councillor Ratton.
Yeah, Councillor Ratton.
Councillor Sears.
There.
Very much. Councillor State. Thank you. I confirm we have a quorum for the meeting. I would also like to welcome Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Councillor Tim Wilson. There are also a number of officers invited to the meeting to present reports and answer the committee questions. I'll be grateful if they could all introduce themselves when they speak to their items. Okay, so item 1, apologies. So I've got apologies from Councillor Flint and Councillor Sain.
Councillor Mazda, please.
Anyone else? Okay. Item 2, substitutions. Councillor Sears will substitute on behalf of Councillor Flint. Any other substitutions? Okay, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest and party whip. I hope you're. Are there any declarations of interest or the party whip from the members in respect of items on the agenda? No party whip received. Okay, thank you. Item 4, Local Government Access to Information Act 1985. That's not applicable for this meeting as we have no items in the private session. Item 5, the minutes. To approve the minutes of previous meeting held on the 23rd of November. Please. Okay. Seconded? Seconded by Councillor Rattigan. All those in favour? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, so we're on to our first report, item 6, Child and Adults Transition. I believe we've got Zoe and Tony.
Good evening, everyone. Can I just check that people can hear me okay? Because I'm not having the best in terms of with my technical issues. Is everything okay? Fabulous. Long may it continue. Thank you. Okay, well, hopefully, as you can see from my report, I'm here this evening to provide an update and hopefully some reassurances in regards to the work that's currently being undertaken in respect of transitions and how we are aiming to ensure that this is a more seamless and more smooth as possible for young people and their families living here in Walsall. Just to confirm, transition is a term used to describe the period of change from childhood to adolescence into adulthood. So when we talk about transition, we're talking about a young person that is getting ready to live independently or moving between the services that's offered in children's services to that in the adult world. Just to clarify what we mean by that term. There are 4 key areas in which a young person should be assisted to prepare for within that. So we look at education and future employment, independent living, which can incorporate accommodation, housing and all that kind of area of support, friends, relationships, community links, and then the health and well-being. So what's been happening over the past 18 months or so there's been a number of focus groups that have been held, and that was previously done in devising and preparing an adult policy as part of an all-age disability model. And what I've done over the last few months, along with the group manager for the children and young people's disability team, is focused on pulling that information together, take what's been gained from those groups and use it to try and implement a clear pathway that allows professionals to have a better understanding as to what such support should be offered as part of that transition process and when it should be offered and by whom. Now, that's not easy because obviously young people and their individual needs are quite complicated, and support levels inevitably they vary between one young person to the next. So what we do need to be clear about is how the support from those key agencies such as education, health and social care can come together at the right time, so that process is as seamless as possible. So support needs for young people, as I said, vary and change at different points, and particularly when they get nearer to adulthood. And not everyone that receives support from children's social services will be eligible for adult social care services, because the eligibility criteria is very different. So preparing for adults should start early enough, around the age of 14, so that the right plan and support for that young person is done in good time to ensure the right support is in place with whomever that might need to be from. And in regards to the type of young people that we work with, there are three main cohorts of young people that are identified in particular as likely to need support. And those are young people that we have in the care of the local authority, those that we have a corporate parenting duty and responsibility for. We've got our young people with special educational needs and or disabilities, so our SEND, and then we've got young people entering into adult services that may be open to social care or early help, but haven't necessarily been identified or have a significant level of planning for a period of time, but are at the point, say, 16 or 17 years old, where it's quite likely that because of some of the issues that have happened in their life, they're going to need some support from adult services moving forward. So as I said, the transition is hoping to be a practice guide for professionals in order to try and prompt, but equally signpost them in the right direction when supporting these young people. So this has led to the development of a toolkit, a transitions toolkit, which is currently in draft form. And the reason why we've chosen to pull this together as a toolkit is because it's a tried and tested way of doing things previously that we've done in other parts of the services within children's social care. So, for example, it's been used very effectively for our public law outline, which is when we're working with our families that are on the children are subject to child protection plans. If there's significant concerns where we're likely to need to go into the public law outline, which is when we consider taking actions in terms of going into court or initiating proceedings. The public law outline toolkit, the PLO toolkit, has been really good for professionals, and the feedback that we've got from that is actually it's really assisted as a practice guide and a resource library, if you like, of where you can gain that information and signpost to other areas of support. So that's why we've gone down the road with the transitions work, because we've gathered such a wealth of information. It was necessary to pull it together so that people knew what to do with it and how we can best support families. And within the toolkit, what we've done is we've broken it down into stages, because it's very clear that the stages and focused on age, it acts as a trigger point for when services need to start considering what support they're going to offer. So, for example, as outlined in my report, you'll see that stage 1 is called the getting ready stage, and that is usually prompted and triggered by the child reaching year 9. So an example of that would be for a child in care. You would have, that would be the point where you would update your child and family assessment, because it would start looking at what the pathway planning, and when I say pathway planning, that is essentially post 16, what the plan is that replaces the care plan, so we know what kind of support our young people are going to need moving into adulthood. We also have a trigger point in our system where we talk about a passport to adulthood, which is essentially a referral process embedded within our system on Mosaic. So what that does, it begins the process of a co-working relationship between children's social care and adult social care. So each of the age ranges breaks down to things. Have you considered this in regards to health? Have you considered this in regards to education? So breaking it down and having those prompts and links is essentially what the stages do. Stage 2 is starting the transitions plan. So it focuses on the work that needs to happen around the ages between 16 to 18. And then the stage 3 is the actual plan itself and focuses on the support that's required between 18 and 25. So if you've done the other stages well and everything's in place, then stage 3 should be pretty clear and straightforward. So the toolkit is one piece of work that we're doing because that's a practice guide. It's a bit of a one-stop shop where resources can be identified and it all links in. There's going to be a pathway aligned to it. For different types of children that you'll be assisting. So we're looking at developing a separate pathway for children in care, along from the ones that perhaps which would focus more on children with disabilities, so that each cohort of young people is catered for within the toolkit. Aside from the practice guide and resource pack, we're going to be doing a co-production piece of work with the young people and families themselves. And this will be a guide for the young people and adults done in cooperation with them telling us what it is that they think that they need. We've done some research already as part of the working group about practice guides that have been used in other areas, what seems to work well, what lands well with families, what identifies work in a language that they can understand. So we've got a starting block, if you like, in terms of how to do that work. And we've started to canvass people that would want to assist us with that through, for example, I'm involved in the local authority improvement board in regards to our preparing for SEND inspection. There's parents that are involved with that are willing to work with this. We've got links in with our autism support, parenting support, FACE. We've got our transition and leaving care service, where we can canvass some of our young care leavers that would want to work with us on this piece of co-production work. So that's going to be separate. And we wanted to focus on the transition toolkit for the practice guide for professionals first, because it seems sensible to just get our ducks in a row, essentially, if you like, between the different partner agencies that are involved. So I'll go on to the actions and what the timescales for the plan in a moment, but just to let you know, in regards to the toolkit, we're very much in a point now where it is in draft, but the consultation processes and the input that we've had from, say, health, education, early help, all those significant areas that need to input into it is pretty much done. What we do have to do is just come together as a working group to align all the resources and make sure that they're embedded within the toolkit. So if I go on to just let you know what the actions are moving forward, and that, as I've outlined in my report, we're hoping that the toolkit is timetabled for completion by the end of February, which is very much on track. There's no reason to say that won't be done on time, and then hopefully we'll be ready to distribute that out to the workforce and the agencies as we need to. In regards to the guidance for the young people and their families, obviously that's running slightly behind all of that. So we're looking to aim to complete and ready for distribution in April. Alongside some of these other pieces of work, there's been separate areas that have been on development. So, for example, a memorandum of understanding, I think I've referred to it in my report, has been completed collaboratively between the CCG and Social Care Commissioning Services. So that's still going through the governance approval at the moment. But in essence, what that's hoping to do is align some of the commissioning arrangements that we have between children's services and adult social care, particularly with health. And one of the things that has come out of that piece of work is putting together a transition panel. So we get better at identifying, tracking and ensuring that all the information that's collated within the toolkit and how we want the professionals to use this as a guide is doing what it needs to do for the young people in which it's supposed to serve. So that is, we're aiming for that work to be completed by the end of March of this year as well. And I think the memorandum of understanding is possibly going to be ready for distribution. I think it's gone through the approval process within the CCG. I'm not sure where it's at in terms of children's service, but I know it's all very imminent. So there's a lot of work coming together at one time. So that's pretty much what we're trying to achieve in transitions, and obviously it's here to request that you agree and endorse those actions. But I'm happy to take any questions from anyone if they have them.
Okay, thank you very much. Did Tony want to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will. Hi, everybody. Tony Meadows. I'm the Interim Director of a very long title, to be perfectly honest. It's Commissioning, Procurement and Contract Management. So some of it's a wider council brief, some of it's very specifically adult social care. In terms of obviously the paper that's been issued, Zoe, thank you for your presentation on that. And again, really pleased to see this coming forward, because it is showing that adults and children are working together where they need to be, because I think in the past things haven't been picked up particularly early enough in terms of that transitions element. So that's really good to see. I guess I just wanted to add that I think in support of that, this is actually part of the Adults Transformation Plan moving forward, how we do focus on this and start that continual work, I suppose, in how we're looking at the needs of those individuals and actually planning ahead a lot sooner. So part of that also means actually taking a bit of a review of some of the services that we do provide in terms of longer term opportunities for younger people around housing and the support they receive, because even with those, some of those current services do, I suppose, provide a little bit of a barrier, because some providers only work with obviously children up to a certain year or young people up to a certain age. They transfer into adults, terms change, all the rates change, and it creates a bit of inconsistency. So one of my key aims is really to support us pulling together that pathway where the right opportunities are there, and we're actually doing something that actually gives parents, carers, families an idea of what the offers are available to young people as they go through transitions. In addition, we're also working with public health at the moment to develop a wellbeing framework, which actually begins to pull down all of the sort of physical, mental, financial wellbeing elements into an all-age sort of approach. So the key thing is we spend a lot of money both internally, externally, and let's try harnessing things a little bit differently and opening up that offer so that it is something that can provide that important support to young people, regardless of where they are on that pathway. So just wanted to add that in for perspective, and obviously in future, if there's anything needed from overview and scrutiny to sort of look at the adults' involvement, more than happy to present it.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the portfolio holder like to come in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, just a couple of quick comments if I can. I think for years it's always been a concern that our young people move from children to adults and potentially slip through the net. So I just want to say I'm pleased to see how adults and children's services are working together with other directorates across the council to make sure nobody slips through the net. And I just want to put on record my thanks to the officers across the council for that commitment to our young people, ensuring the transition is as supported and smooth as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up to questions now. I've actually got one which Tony briefly touched on there. I was going to ask, how much work do you do with housing associations, charities and other such organisations as part of this?
I'll pick up on, obviously, in terms of looking at that, I suppose, post-18 sort of element. I think there are a lot of opportunities that have been looked at with housing associations. I think it's fair to say that is a work in development. I think there have been some opportunities in the area in terms of where developers, external developers, maybe with different agendas, have taken some opportunities to develop themselves in the market. And maybe those aren't necessarily offering what I would see or believe to be the right opportunities for younger people. I think there's a lot of conversations, and I've met, to be perfectly honest, with Walsall Housing Group and other housing associations recently to actually start looking how we can start influencing their planning for Walsall in the future, looking at those opportunities where we can begin to think, well, what we're going to need in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 15 years' time, looking at how technology can be brought in to support people in the home as well. So those homes for the future, and it's really, really important that we do that alongside as well key worker housing to enable the right support to be available when somebody has a need. So I think there's work that has taken place. I think there's some opportunities, though, for a bit of a refresh. I know we've all had other things taken our mind over the past, 2 years. But now we've got that window of opportunity to a bit reset that strategic aim and really look what we can do for the future.
Thank you very much. Just on that, where you said that you've been in touch with housing associations, were they receptive?
Yes, very.
Brilliant, fantastic. Okay, any questions? Councillor Rattigan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, obviously you were talking about the focus groups and how, is it over the different cohorts? And also how the feedback that you've got, how will this be implemented in future in the transitioning plans?
Yeah, so the focus groups were from a variety of professionals and managers from various disciplines that included social care, health, education, all the key agencies that were involved or that would be involved in working with some of these young people and their families. And there was a whole range of areas that have been discussed in regards to the different facets and stages of support and when they need to be implemented. And essentially what we've done is that the focus groups were very good. There were very good conversations taking place. Everybody knew what their own agency's pinch points were in terms of where they need to get it, where they are getting it right and where they need to improve. What wasn't happening from those focus groups is some clear sort of actions and outline about, okay, so what do we do with this? And essentially, that's what the toolkit has done. It's pulled it together to align it and to make it more useful for the professionals that are involved. Sorry, I didn't hear all of your question, but did that kind of answer?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very interested in this toolkit, especially as you detail what help that they can expect to receive, when they're going to receive it, and who's responsible. Is this a first of its kind, or is there other authorities who've done this before?
I don't know if other authorities have used a toolkit. I'm assuming so, but it might have been called something different because, you know, some people refer to it as a practice guide. I think the toolkit is something we've adopted here in Walsall because, as I say, we've used it in other areas and it's been received very well. It's a very sensible way of assisting professionals with providing the right support, because essentially what we have is a wealth of information out there, but it's about pulling that all together. So the toolkit will have the pathway and the guide and the prompts, and it will be set down very easy to read for people to use, in terms of they have this young person, this is what's happening with them, this is the age they are. So it's almost like a guide that you can go through as to what you need to consider. This guide will then assist people, like, for example, with children in care, the independent reviewing officers can use it as part of their reviewing process. So we've got a child who's now 16, have these processes being followed as outlined within the toolkit. It'll be really useful for our early help partners to have an understanding about what kind of resources and support is out there. So the library of resources that are attached to it, it's not just documents in isolation, it's links to other areas of support as well, because, like I say, not all people will have support from adult social care per se, but will certainly need to have information and support from community networks and links. So it's a lot of information to pull together, but it puts it all into one place. And obviously we want a lot of this information to be accessible via the internet as well, so as part of the local offer work, and it's all streamlining with those kind of work streams that we're currently undertaking here in Walsall. So I hope, and it can be tweaked, it's something that we can, you know, we can embed, and then we can change it. I mean, it'll have to be updated because we know that policies change, information shifts, times move on. So it's a working document, it always will be, but it'll be a bit of a one-stop shop for professionals to access. And then obviously and separate to that will also be the guidance, which will work very similarly, but will be written in a way for families and young people to understand.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions and perhaps a comment. First of all, when we've got these groups that we're asking about the service and the working groups, are we including the users of the service, so the children? Are we asking the children's opinion on how this works and how it would be better for them? And secondly, my question is, it's really good, and the comment, really good that we're doing this, because it is something that I think all of us have been talking about, a good transition across. The concern I have, and hopefully you can allay that concern, is that when you have collaboration amongst several different agencies, who's going to be in charge? Because we don't want a situation where children or parents are sort of pushed to one agency to say, have they done it right? Then going to the other agency. Is there going to be one point of authority, one point of responsibility and accountability where you can say, right, this process may not have gone right. This is the person who's accountable, and we'll go to that person. Because we wouldn't want, I'm sure colleagues will agree, for parents and families to be running around trying to chase up the different people from the different agencies. So if you could answer those, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in answer to your first question around the support and the getting the feedback from the young people themselves, then yes, absolutely. And the co-production piece of work, particularly around the guidance for children and families, absolutely. And one of the reasons why we've put that secondary to the toolkit is because we need to be absolutely clear what our processes are in order to put the right guidance in place for families and what works for them. So yes, it totally includes the young people and their cooperation with this, as did the previous focus groups. They canvass support through the Children in Care Council previously. It's not that wasn't as in depth as the co-production work that we're going to do in terms of the practice guide, but yeah, the information and feedback from the families and young people themselves is being done. Secondly, in regards to the ownership of it, I'm taking the lead on this as it currently stands and the working group that we currently have to sort of pull it together is much smaller than some of the previous focus groups, and they include workers from myself and another manager from Children's Services, and then 2 managers from Adult Services. So we're keeping the current group that's finalising all of this quite small for that very reason, really, in terms of the making sure that the right input has been canvassed from all the different agencies. In terms of things like you mentioned there, in terms of health and education and making sure that they're clearly aligned to it, that consultation process has been done. The actual toolkit itself, although it's still in draft, has been sent out quite far and wide for people to have a play around with it, see what their teams and their own agencies and their own professional working arrangements think of it, and then that's how it's been fed back to one focus point, which is myself. And then we've regrouped as a working group to feed all those different areas of input back into it. And at the moment, there's just a couple of areas that we're still waiting from final input. So that's how it's generally worked. And that's kept it quite tight and focused to allow for to make sure that we don't have some of the issues that you've raised.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And that clearly explains what the process is. But how do you envisage, or what do you envisage, or who do you envisage being in charge of this process? So I understand what you're doing. You're managing the process and you're going through that. Have you thought about who the accountable body will be right at the end? Because as councillors, if somebody approaches us, you're a working group, you're trying to set up this process. In time, if somebody approaches us, we want to write a letter of not complaint necessarily, but for clarification for the person who's accountable. So, for example, if there's an issue in, I don't know, Clean and Green, we know that Simon Nielsen is the executive director. He has overall authority over that. Because we're collaborating with several agencies, what I want to try and understand is who the accountable body will be, that councillors and others can say, right, this is what I was expecting, that's what the process has told us. This hasn't been met, or it has been met, because sometimes we write to compliment officers, but we want to write to the accountable person to say what's happened, what's gone wrong, or well done, everything's gone right. So what I'm asking you, have you envisaged, and you may not have thought about it yet, have you envisaged which body is going to be accountable for the whole process?
Well, the toolkit itself is going to become a guide that's embedded within children's social care and adult social care as part of our service delivery. So it comes with the governance and arrangements that all of our work encompasses. So in regards to things like the transitions panel, for example, because there's so many elements to transitions and so many things to consider. So, for example, if one of the issues is around commissioning arrangements and service delivery and alignment of commissioning between children and adults, then the transition panel will identify some of that, and the CCG might be the accountable body for some certain elements of it. There's education that comes into play in regards to some of the transitions work in regards to some of our young people and the SEND process. So it very much depends on which key issue is aligned, if that makes any sense.
If I could, I mean, I can understand what you're saying. I do feel we would benefit from having somebody in charge of the whole transition process, rather than looking at families having to write to the CCG, then to the education, and then to someone else. But perhaps you can just feed that through. That it needs to be quite clear to parents, counsellors, whoever needs to contact, because sometimes they won't understand where the issue lies, where the issue is. They may want to contact a figurehead, so that figurehead can then sort of drill deeper and find out what the issues are. So thank you for that.
Tony, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, just to come in for, I suppose, just a bit of additional clarity. I mean, again, in terms of where transition sits, it is in that sort of weird juxtaposition in a weird place, because it does sit across the two areas, hence what it is. Obviously, there are opportunities for us to review that element. But I think when we also look around the health thing, we need to remember we have the context at the moment of Walsall Together. So from that is an existing partnership. And I think that any issues regarding health, CCG, etc., again, coming through either to adults or to children's, we would be able to raise those issues in that forum and actually support, obviously, dealing with those queries, as opposed to forcing a situation where people have to go everywhere to try and actually garner their answers. So whilst we could potentially look at something more in the future, and no doubt there'll be conversations around who is going to take control of that in the future, I think the reality is when we're starting to look at that broader, we have got that Walsall Together framework, and really adults and children's need to be really taking the lead in working together to pull those other partners in.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Murphy?
Oh, yeah. What I want to ask is, the transition, that's great how you set it for Walsall, but a lot of us live on the border and some of us be in Staffordshire. Do they recognise this toolkit in other councils, in other counties, etc.?
Well, this is a toolkit designed for us here in Walsall, but as part of that, and we do have obviously children and young people that need to access services outside of the borough. So the toolkit will certainly identify that and what some of the avenues that we need to explore if you do need to link in cross-border agencies. So it does to a certain degree, because obviously, as I said, there's not a one-size-fits-all for some of these young people, and accessing services from other areas is going to be part of that. But the overall toolkit in terms of how we're devising it is based on the mechanisms that we have here within Walsall with our partners.
Sorry, can I come back in? So could some of them fall through the loop as such? If that's what I'm worried, if they've got, obviously, say a lot of us live borders. So what can you do to reassure that they won't slip through the cracks as such if they've got to move on to Staffordshire or and whatever? Obviously there's different councils, counties out there. Is there anything that you can put in place to help make sure this doesn't happen, basically?
I suppose the resources and the support links to varying agencies, if they're needed to be accessed outside of the borough, would link into that. But ultimately, that if we're talking about children that are open to children's social care in Walsall, then regardless of where they're actually located, because we have, for example, our children in care cohort, we'll deal with various other agencies in different areas of the country by virtue of the fact that they can be placed far and wide. But ultimately, we have to liaise with those agencies to ensure that the local services, the local schools, the local help in whatever form that may take is provided. So the toolkit would work in the same way.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to go back onto Councillor Nawaz's comment. I think it's a valid comment and a valid point to raise that we will take that back as feedback, Councillor Nawaz, because it does need somebody to be clear who is in charge, because if somebody has an issue or a query to raise, it's not down to the family or the elected member to try and work out who may be the best organisation to support the family and the young person. So we'll take that back and we'll include that in the work we're doing. Thank you, Councillor Nawaz.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? No? Okay. So the recommendation is for progress and achievements to be endorsed and proposals moving forward to be supported, which I think that we as a committee can definitely do. This item does not require a formal decision, so I'll take the matter as noted unless any member dissents.
Just ask one. Sorry, can I just recommend one thing? So once this starts, can we ask it, and some of us may not be here when it's the new municipal year, but for it to come back to this committee so we can see how it's progressing.
Oh, is that, yeah, I was about to raise that. No problem. So we'll go ahead then and do that as noted. All in favour? Thank you very much. And perhaps under areas of focus, we'll discuss maybe when would that be appropriate. Just quickly before you go to the two officers, have you got any preferred timescale on when you'd like us to review? Is 6 months too soon? Is 12 months too soon? What's your thoughts?
I think 6 months is a good time to give an update and let everyone know and give assurances that it's working as it's supposed to, or obviously notify you of any changes that we've made in regards to the progress. So I'm happy to come back in 6 months from the implementation. Absolutely.
Tony?
Obviously, no problem at all regarding the toolkit, because you know that's Zoe's bag. But maybe can we broaden it so that obviously we can bring that broader perspective of how transition sits, where it's you know it's being led from that point of view, and then maybe some further information, obviously from the adults' perspective and children's perspective, on how we're developing that broader transitions approach as well. And within that 6 months, at least, even if it's just a baselining of where we're going, sense of direction, a bit more detail, I think that would be a good idea to maintain the traction.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. Thank you very much, both. That was extremely interesting. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So, item 7, Youth Justice Peer Review. I believe we've got Lee and Phil.
Hello there, Councillor. It's just Phil Rutherford here. I'm the strategic lead for the Youth Justice Service here in Walsall, and I'm happy to present the report.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for your time. For context, in 2019, HMIP, which stands for Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation, came to Walsall to undertake their formal inspection of youth offending or youth justice services here in Walsall. The inspectorate came out with the classification of requires improvement. Certainly, as you can imagine, following that judgment, a significant amount of activity, work, improvement activity has been completed and undertaken since that time. And certainly, yeah, we talked about it through different council meetings. We've had a scrutiny working group to examine some of the recommendations, and quite rightly, it's received the support and the scrutiny from across the council and across children's services. In late summer 2021, discussions within the Youth Justice Service Performance and Partnership Board considered whether or not we needed some external check and challenge of progress against the recommendations that were made by HMIP back in 2019. And the board, the board of the Youth Justice Service, made the decision to look for that independent person to come in and provide that challenge. It's been an incredibly helpful process, actually, I would say, because not only has it enabled us to stop looking backwards, back to 2019, back to the inspection that occurred at the time. But it's also given us the ability to start looking forward, to start to think about actually where can we next go with the Youth Justice Service and for the young people and families that we work with. In terms of timing, it's incredibly helpful because we're now moving into our strategic planning timeframe, our strategic planning processes. So again, the review has been incredibly helpful because not only has it told us where we're doing things really well, it's enabled us to identify things that we could look to do better when we start our new planning year in April 2022. So incredibly helpful bit of work. The YGS board, they chose to look at 4 main areas of recommendations from the HMIP inspection, and that was our out-of-court disposal models. So throughout the report, we've abbreviated that to OOCD. The board wanted to look at how well the service was managing risk of harm to others. They wanted to look at our model of delivery for victims of youth crime, and it wanted us to look at how well the board was governing, how well the board had oversight of the service, and the quality of information and data that the board was receiving. So it wanted us to look at 4 main areas that were found within the inspection. The first area was out-of-court disposals, OOCDs. This, in a nutshell, is our statutory responsibility for young people who have committed an offence who go on to receive a police disposal such as a caution or a youth conditional caution. The inspection team came in, they found a few things. They made the assumption that our processes lacked joint decision making, and when we talk about joint decision making, HMIP believed that the police were leading in that decision and the Youth Justice Service was secondary to that. It also found that assessments were not always completed prior to those decisions being made. And finally, it found that there were some gaps in representation upon that out-of-court disposal panel. Pleasingly, the review found that we have successfully addressed all of the issues that were identified and highlighted within the inspection report, that we've got a robust joint process in place with the police. Our representation at panel is good. We were most latterly joined by colleagues from Early Help and Children's Social Care at the end of last year. And our assessment processes always occurred prior to that joint decision being made. So it was a really good finding for us with this bit of work, and it gave us the green light to start to think about where we can take this next. So in summary, we got a big green tick in terms of our review. The next section was looking at the way that we were managing risk of harm to others. In summary, the HMIP inspection report included that risk of harm to others was not identified, assessed, planned for, or responded to well enough. A significant amount of that inspection focused upon our assessments that were completed as part of the out-of-court disposal model. What we did is we changed the assessment tool. We used an approved assessment tool approved by the Youth Justice Board, the National Youth Justice Board, called Asset Plus. So all young people were assessed using the Asset Plus toolkit prior to that joint decision-making panel happening. So that automatically improved our ability to assess, identify, plan for risk of harm to others. The review also found particular strengths around youth justice officers' knowledge and skill in undertaking those assessments. It triangulated lots of evidence to suggest that the training that we had put on for staff and partners had made a significant impact upon the quality of those assessments. So Pleasingly, again, we got a green tick from the reviewer to say that we were successful in the improvements that were made since the inspection team came in 2019. Really helpful, though. One of the findings around this bit of work was that we are managing a significantly high level of risk within the service at the moment. A significantly high percentage that can go up and down depending upon the week, but it was finding that we were managing huge numbers of high risk young people. The reviewer felt that the current systems that we've got in place, although were strong, robust, well thought through, weren't sustainable over the next 12 months or so, as caseloads would automatically increase. So really helpful. We got a good bit of advice, feedback about where we need to take this next, particularly around our high risk panel that we have. So this is a multi-agency panel that we have in place to work with young people that present in these high risk needs to other people. So we are working with our partners to review, develop how we have that oversight of that high risk cohort. But really good bit of work and some useful information to help us take it forward to the next step. The third part of the review was that they looked at our victim model and our use of restorative practice. Now, under the Victims Code of Practice, the Youth Justice Service is one of those agencies, organisations that's bound by the Code of Practice. So we have a statutory responsibility to victims. In 2019, the inspection team found that our model of delivery for victims lacked consistency. Therefore, victims could receive a different level of service depending upon the officer that it was allocated to. And that the very model itself, where we had youth justice officers who simultaneously held cases of young people that were offenders, and also those that had been victims of youth crime, led to a conflict of interest. Very quickly following the inspection, the Youth Justice Performance and Partnership Board made the decision to change the model, and we put in place a comprehensive service level agreement with victim support here in Walsall. The board, to its credit, have monitored the success of that service level agreement with victim support. We've undertaken several audits around the quality of practice in this area. And then in November last year, the board made the decision that we needed to once again change our model. Now, this is very much in keeping, in alignment with the findings of this review as well. The review concluded that although the issues have changed to the ones that were found from the inspection, that new issues were present, which would mean that should HMIP come back, which they are likely to do in 2023, that they would not be happy with the model that was in place. So positively, the Youth Justice Service Board made the decision to change our model to recruit a dedicated specialist officer within the current budget, within the service, to make sure that their focus is always there on victim issues, to provide that consistent high level of support for victims. So we didn't get the green tick in that area about progress made. Absolutely, there was good practice identified. The very fact that we responded strongly and quickly was really good. But the model itself did not hold up to scrutiny. And we came to that same conclusion through our oversight and audit process too. So we have created the post. It is going through HR processes at this moment, and we'll be looking to recruit to that post over the next 4 to 6 weeks. The final area that the review looked at was the use of performance information and the wider engagement of the YJS Performance and Partnership Board. So the inspection found that the YJS board did not have sufficient information about practice or the evidence base that supports effective work. One of the things that we did very, very quickly following the inspection was to identify dedicated performance officer support from Children's Services Performance Team. Following that, we spent 12 months, 18 months, 2 years going through a journey of developing our performance information that goes to the board, so that actually it can make a difference to practice on the ground. The reviewer found that the performance information supplied to the board was good, was strong, robust, and comprehensive. Of particular strength was a bit of performance work that we looked at, focused on young people from Black and mixed heritage backgrounds. So a really strong bit of work around ethnic disproportionality in the justice system. So a really strong bit of work. The review also went on to find that the board has improved the way that it engages with the service, has improved its overall strategic governance of youth justice services significantly since the inspection team came out. And that includes, you know, a strong strategic plan that's in place, a good process within the board that looks at new delivery models, which provides scrutiny, checks, oversight of, and it felt that the board itself was a learning board that looked to constantly improve outcomes for children and young people. So positively, again, this fourth element got a big green tick to say that we've made the necessary improvements. Again, not to say that there's not things that we'd like to do better to improve upon, but actually that the findings from this report have been really helpful in going into that planning process for 2022 to 2025. And just to finally say that the planning process is very much underway. The board, the Youth Justice Service Performance and Partnership Board, had a development day just after Christmas in January, where we looked at how we can continue to improve outcomes, to set our priorities. And in terms of timeline as well, the Youth Justice Strategic Plan, which is one of our statutory functions, will need to come to Cabinet, and then it will need to go to full council meeting for approval. So there will be additional oversight of that planning process too. Can I ask if there's any questions, Councillor?
Yeah, first one. I think the portfolio holder might be best to answer this one. Who funds this?
So this is funded by the partnership. So I think this is one of the areas that sometimes the council in the past has had criticism for, particularly regarding to funding. But actually, it's not just the council that funds this; it's a partnership funding arrangement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to come in on the general points that Phil's done? It was very detailed, his review of that.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, as you can see from the report and from Phil's presentation, that Phil and his team, and they're quite a small niche team, have done a lot of work. So I want to say thank you to Phil and his team for that. But clearly they're not complacent. There's still a lot of work to do and there's still quite a way to go. And Phil's already touched upon the strategic plan, should be scheduled to go to Cabinet in May this year and then be presented to Council for approval. So again, Phil's already mentioned there's additional scrutiny, but obviously we welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. And Bill, that was so detailed. You stole my thunder with my top question. I was going to ask about the Eric's phrase, Black and mixed heritage young people on the system, but unless you want to go a little bit further into that with what work you're doing to try and reduce those numbers.
Absolutely, Chair. When we first set out on this journey to understand over-representation within the justice system, which was several years ago now, we realised very quickly at that as a partnership we needed to understand what that meant for Walsall, because national data, national trends suggest something, but actually it doesn't really matter what goes on down in London. For us, we need to be really focusing on what happens here in Walsall. So it was an extensive bit of work that covered 2 years. The reason why it covered 2 years was that we needed a suitable period of time to have enough data to make some good conclusions from it. And what we found is that that Black children here in Walsall are overrepresented within the system. And within the system, I mean right from the very start, from arrest to police disposal, to conviction in court, to eventually receiving a custodial sentence. However, the main focus for us going forward, and this will again require much more additional thought, analysis, oversight. This will be an ongoing journey for us. The main issue that we found was that young people, so 10 to 18 with mixed heritage, dual heritage or mixed heritage, were by far our most overrepresented group within the system. Our data will tell us that Asian young people are underrepresented, which is no different to other parts of the children's services world. But our big issue at the moment is mixed heritage. Now, mixed heritage is incredibly vast and complicated and complex, and it can mean lots of different things. So we're working with our children's services performance team to do a new analysis, so refresh that bigger deep dive to understand that data more effectively. But what are we doing? So we're doing a huge amount of work on the ground. We've established a disproportionality forum for youth justice practitioners and partners. This is a forum which maintains oversight of these issues for children and young people. It gives staff the safe space to talk around equality issues, but mainly the issues that impact upon our young people and families. It gives us the opportunity to understand research, thematic themes, best practice from around the country, and it also gives us the framework to change practice for the better. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. From the Disproportionality Forum, we have established a congruence subgroup. And congruence, we are looking to examine specific numbers of young people that are going through court. And we're trying to understand the way that young people are dealt with when they go into court. So the amount of young people that receive convictions, we're trying to understand whether or not they received the order that was proposed and when they didn't, and understand the judges and magistrates' comments around it. So we're looking to understand this much more in depth so we can then change our practice within our report writing for court, and we can change our practice when we advocate for children and young people whilst in court. So that's just one practice example that we're looking to change. But I can imagine, Councillor, that, you know, my board, they choose the priorities, they lead the service, they set the strategic direction. But I can imagine that disproportionality and the overrepresentation of Black and mixed heritage boys, mostly boys, will be a priority going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Narvaez?
Yeah, just a comment on that. I mean, it is difficult for me because I think it's quite public knowledge that there's a overrepresentation of people from Black and mixed heritage and BAME communities. The system. What I want to try and hear from you, I guess, is why does it happen, and what the specific issues are in Walsall about it, or what are we doing to find out what the specific issues are in Walsall. Some figures would be good as well, so we can see what the differences are, but also some of the work we're doing to try and prevent this from happening. You know, is there an issue that the system doesn't understand? The challenges these children face. Is there an issue about they don't have the right representation when they go to court or when they're in front of a judge? So it's trying to find out from yourselves what the underlying issues are, so that we can then sort of look at, right, you know, are we putting in preventative things for these issues? What I'm hearing is you've done an analysis, you found out what's happening, which just confirms what's happening nationally. But what are some of the preventative things that you want to do to try and tackle it? I've not really heard too much on that. If you could enlighten us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I haven't got the data, the numbers to hand, I'm afraid. I didn't come prepared for that element of the question, Councillor, but I certainly can provide you with numbers and data and trends, etc., that we've done locally. So I certainly can do that. What you'll find is that the youth justice system, or the youth justice service in particular, as Councillor Wilson said, it's a small part of children's services, but a very important part. And what you'll find is that often we are a system where young people end up. So often we have a young person who is 15, 16, maybe 17, who gets into trouble and then comes through into the system. Now by that point, they've already had 15 years of life experience. Other issues around discrimination, underrepresentation or overrepresentation, and they end up within a system. That system can be detrimental to children and young people's lives by very definition. And the more that we can keep young people out of the system, the better. Absolutely. So by the time that they get to us, they've already had a significant life experience, and that includes issues within school. For young people, but this isn't all BAME young people, absolutely not. But specifically for black boys and for boys with mixed heritage, often their experience of education has been poorer than their white peers. So they will have higher rates of exclusion, generally, not always. They will have higher issues around SEND, often undiagnosed. They will have issues around mental health that haven't been addressed or identified early enough. And what happens is there's just two of many different issues. They end up within the system with these issues. Each community, each different group will have different journeys, different stories leading up to that point. So each one is slightly different. Certainly there is a role around community and trust of authorities, including the police and the courts. So we know that often young people who are arrested by the police will not always plead guilty for a crime they have done at the earliest opportunity. And that may be down to representation, as you suggested, Councillor. But often they won't plead guilty. Now, if you don't plead guilty early in the justice system, it often can mean that you receive a more serious outcome as a result. You may not receive opportunities to receive early intervention, potentially as part of a police disposal. So there are cultural issues around trust that need to be addressed, but the Youth Justice Service on its own is not capable of changing that whole justice system. It can only change small parts of it and then help to impact and influence other bits of it. So one of the things that we're doing is we're undertaking a new stop and search program to inform children, young people and their families around their rights and how that can work. We're working with our police colleagues to help them understand some of the issues that we've uncovered through our ethnicity analysis. We are sharing information with the magistrates and the sentencers around the journey of some of our children that come through the system in an effort to make an impact upon their understanding, their knowledge, but also the sentences that they deliver, they make. But yeah, the Youth Justice Service is one small part of a wider system, which there is discrimination within it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It was the last part of it, which was the interesting part, because that's what I would be looking for. So where we talk to these children, where we learn something from them. So for example, if they had a bad experience at school or their issues haven't been dealt with, because this isn't a short-term thing, is it? This is something that we have to work almost across the generation to try and fix. What I'm looking for, and I'm sure others are looking for, is that those messages and those learning from the children who've gotten into that area is fed back to the schools or to the others, so that they can try and bring around the change and try and beat some of those difficulties or challenges before it gets to this stage. So it seems that you're doing as much as you can in trying to get that information back to them, because it would be good to analyse that, to tell you the truth. So if there's an issue where children from black and mixed heritage backgrounds are being excluded more so than their white counterparts, we need to feed that back to the schools and then see what the school's doing in regard to trying to have a look at that and see why it's so different. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking, because that's the only way we're going to improve this. But thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back on that, Phil?
Just really quickly, part of our next steps over the next 12 months is to develop a specific offer for that group of children to make sure that there is an offer for them. And within that, we are planning a steering group led by these children and these young people to make sure that strategic leaders within the Youth Justice Service Performance and Partnership Board can hear their stories. So we're very keen from April 22-25 as part of that wider plan that young people's voice are absolutely at the front and in the centre of it. And I can envisage that the steering group from this particular offer can have a really strong voice in that and can be quite powerful. But yeah, it's just one element of a wider bit of work that we're trying to push through here.
Okay. Something that you touched on there, and I know you went into a bit of detail around it, but I think it's worth examining a bit more. You said that some of these young people have undiagnosed conditions that are discovered, maybe SEN or something similar. What changes in terms of how they're treated, the support that they're given? How does the system then interact with those people differently? And I understand this isn't necessarily all going to be the Youth Justice Service, but I'm keen just to understand what happens under those scenarios.
Yeah, and actually this is an issue for all children that end up in the youth justice system, and often the very fact that they're within the system means that we identify and understand some issues that haven't been identified before. So it's not just for our black children and mixed heritage children, although it's amplified for that group of children. So the Youth Justice Service is a partnership. Councillor Wilson referred to the fact that we are funded by a partnership. Now, we have co-located officers funded through the local authority or funded through the police, through the PCC, through CCG and through CAMS. So we have an offer for children that come into the service with undiagnosed needs. My staff are skilled at assessment, at identifying these needs, and then we have good pathways in place to make sure that these young people have their needs addressed. Have we got that perfectly, Councillor? I don't think we have. I think we need to continue to make sure that we understand the needs of our children on a year-by-year basis. But absolutely, we are established as a partnership to make sure we can pick up those needs.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Phil, that was extremely detailed. So the recommendations are to note the findings and assurance provided by the review, support the future priorities and areas for development identified. I'll check with Councillor Nawaz on this one before he interrupts me, but I think this might be one that comes back to us at some point again.
No, I think it's something that this committee should look at every year. I think it's important for us to, and I understand it's a small part of the whole scheme, but it's for us to see whether the whole scheme is working. It may be a good idea to get somebody in from the board if they're up for it. I mean, the last time we asked someone to come and undergo scrutiny, I don't think they'll come back. But if you can get someone from the board to come along and tell us about their plans and what they've done and allow us to perhaps ask questions, that would be useful as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. So the item does not require a formal decision, so I'll take the matter as noted unless any member dissents. Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Phil. Okay, 8, we've got the areas of focus to note the work programme of the committee for the remainder of the municipal year. Once again, this item doesn't require a formal decision, but I'll open it up for discussion. Nikki, did you want to go through anything in regards to this? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask, is council coming back to the next meeting?
The intention is to ask, you asked a number of questions when they came last time. So to get those questions responded to, anyway, under the oversight part of the agenda, so there won't be anyone presenting. Then if you can review that information and decide whether you need any is that okay?
Any further comments or questions? Everybody happy with that? Okay, once again, it doesn't require a formal decision, so I'll take the matter as noted. Okay, thank you very much. Everyone's in agreement. And thank you very much for the meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 8th of March 2022 at 6 p.m. Thank you.